the solid mineral agenda. But that's not realistic. In every part of the world, where you kickstart such sectors, government will have to do the initial investment. In fact, government will have to invest heavily at the initial level so that you can make the sector attractive, so that you can create all the necessary infrastructure that are needed for investors to be attracted and come and invest. That was our own line of thinking. And we tried to create that special intervention. They were vehement about it. And I wondered, we sat down, myself, Goji, and a committee of appropriation, and we said, so how do you want to diversify? We don't want the president to be embarrassed. Every day he talks about this, everywhere he talks about solid minerals and the rest, but the reality is that they will not be able to do a lot. Same with agriculture. The allocation is inadequate. So we try to create a special intervention for agriculture so that we will be able to open that sector, do more, create jobs, and be able to diversify the economy the way the government is talking about. The budget team were very vehement about that. And because we also understand some issue that has to do with revenue challenges, but there are a lot of cuts that you can do within the budget to be able to accommodate these things. So, well, to the best of our knowledge, we've tried what we can do at the level of National Assembly to see that we align the policy thrust of our government with budgetary allocation to the best that we can.
You mentioned something there. I would like to have your opinion on it. There was another area of disagreement between you and the economic team, I mean the National Assembly, had to do with the intervention program. I think that 5,000 naira intervention. Absolutely. Yes. What was finally agreed on that? Is that starting in 2016 or what?
Well, it is going to start in 2015. We left the whole money in the budget. In 2016, we left the whole money in the budget. The 500 billion is there in the service-wide vote. Let me say very clearly, the National Assembly has nothing against that money. We want that money to be utilized. We want that money to reach the poorest of the poor in this country, the most vulnerable, as Mr. President wants it to be. We want that money to be invested deep down, people in the grassroots. Now, but when you look at the bigger picture of the whole scenario, and knowing how these things are, and programs like this in the past, we were a bit cautious. While we agree that that program is important and it should be implemented, we were a bit worried about the capacity of the implementing agent who is going to implement this. Of course, there's a team set up in the office of the Vice President charged with the responsibility of this implementation. We are not saying that they are incompetent or whatever, but what we are saying is that have you been able to build the capacity to push this program, to spend 500 billion just with a 3-month preparation, 4-month, 5, 6-month preparation? Why don't you take a whole 12 months to prepare? Why don't you take a component of that money to build your capacity, design the program in the most effective way, design it in such a way that it will be implementable and it will actually reach the target people that the program wants to reach. That's the perspective of the National Assembly. That's where we're coming from. So we invited them, tried to engage them to know if they have built sufficient capacity to be able to implement this program. Of course, they came, made their presentation and the rest. But again, we still had our doubt, but we don't want to be blackmailed. So we've kept that money. We're praying that everything goes on well. We hope that, as they told us,
you are not satisfied.
As they told us, if you left to us in the National Assembly, we will prefer to warehouse that money, vote certain amount of that money for preparations. Okay. Let them study why previous situations failed. Let them be able to perfect how this implementation will be done. We actually believe that there's a bit of a haste in it. But again, we are approaching the whole situation with an open mind. We've approved the money. We wish them luck, and we hope that during the course of the year, they will be able to implement the programs.
Finally, I would like to understand from you, one key place or area that the National Assembly or the country has always had a problem with the budgets has been the issue of implementation. With all that you've said now, what the president is going to get as the 2016 budget is a document the National Assembly has tried very carefully to make sure it's their own. It's no more what they brought, because they had plenty issues what the president sent had a lot of issues. Now, when it comes to the issue of implementation, understanding how we've had before where the president or past presidents, we say, well, this is not what we sent, and then they start implementing what they want to implement and not what the National Assembly passed. How do you see this going forward?
Well, I don't expect that when we send the budget, the president will not accent. I think the president also holds the National Assembly in high esteem, and 100% I believe that Mr. President will implement this budget. If there is anything that gives me peace of mind and satisfaction, is the integrity of the president. Mr. President will not allow a bill passed by the National Assembly into an act sent to him, and after accenting to have him in a situation where he is not going to implement. I believe he is going to implement the budget. But also remember that we have standing committees that are ready to work. They're very, very energized. They want to continue their oversight activities. The appropriation committee is also standing by month after month. We'll follow up to see what releases have been made and the level of implementation. So this year there's going to be a very robust interaction between the executive and the National Assembly at the level of standing committees and of course the appropriation committee. But the most important thing is that I strongly believe that Mr. President is going to implement the budget. But in addition to that, we need to, while the size of the budget is increasing, we'll be more satisfied and happy at the National Assembly if it is the capital component that is increasing. But if you look at it now, both the capital component and the recurrent component, it's all increasing. And it doesn't look healthy. And we keep saying something. If you want to reduce the size of the budget, there are certain items in the budget that has become sacrosanct. It seems to me that the executive arm of government is even scared to look at these areas. And these are areas where there are a lot of issues. One of the big issues, and of course I've said that severally to the budget team, is the cash call. So if you are talking about cuts in the budget, why are you wasting your time over little things in the budget? Why don't you go and confront the monster? Cash call, 1 trillion. They dump in our budget every year. Last year, 1.2 trillion. And last year, the finance committee, I was chair finance committee, the entire finance committee said, look, we are going to go very aggressive. And we're able to cut out 200 billion out of the total amount for cash call. And what we said is that the 200 billion naira should move to capital expenditure, to raise up the capital expenditure. They refused. The budget office supported them, and of course the Ministry of Finance. Until date, there is no any budget team that has been able to stand and face the NNPC or the Ministry of Petroleum Resources and tell them, show us how you arrive at this figure of cash call. Then we've asked them severally, give us the details of the various business arrangements. These are the key areas that you should look at. These are areas where big money are invested. Now, who cares about the various business arrangements? We have about 5, 6, 7 business arrangements. Who looks at it? Who negotiates these arrangements? Nobody is asking questions about that. Whether the country is shortchanged or not shortchanged, nobody is talking about that. So long as we want to start reducing some unhealthy costs in our budgeting system, then we have to start looking at issues like the cash call. They're a very serious issue, and I hope that the executive, moving forward, will be able to confront that monster and address it.
Out of those that say it's the National Assembly that should address it, you have the power of the pulse. You are the one appropriating. You are the one supposed to ask questions, get answers, and effect changes in the budget.
Well, as you know, in any part of the world, the National Assembly do not exist in isolation. Whatever we do, it has to be implemented by the executive arm of government. In as much as there are a lot of things that we go ahead to do. There are a lot of things I haven't mentioned, even in this budget, that we've gone ahead to do. And even if the executive arm of government objects to such things, we are not going to reverse those things. There are plenty of such things. But there are some key issues that you need to get the buy-in of the executive arm of government, and you also need to be a bit careful. But I'm convinced beyond reasonable doubt that the cash call is over bloated. They just bring this money, do their calculation at the NNPC, take it to the budget office, then there's no any question. The finance, the budget the team will just take a look at it and dump it in our budget year after year. So why should we continue that way? So these are some of the issues that we need to look at. Then, of course, the issue of the personnel in trying to bring down the recurrent expenditure. Every agency in this country must join the IPs. Every agency should. Every agency must join the IPs. You have now, for instance, only just about 100 billion out of the 1.7. Just only about, I think, 100 billion, yes, actually 100 billion, out of the 1.7 trillion personnel cost that is captured in the IPs. So you have just about 15% or 20% of the agencies captured in IPs. So if we are serious, we need to get the agencies. No any agency has an excuse not to be part of the IPs. 100% of the agencies must be captured in the IPs. By the time they are captured in the IPs, you'll be able to see the real personnel cost. And I believe that we'll be able to save substantial amount of money. Then when you go to the recurrent component, you have an agency. Every year, they are buying 200 computers. Next year, 200 computers. The third year, 200 computers. Tomorrow, they are buying flowers. Next tomorrow, they are buying UPS. You see all this junk still existing in the budget. So the executive will have to do a thorough job in cleaning up such mess before bringing it to the National Assembly, moving forward.
Well, I hope you found that chart as educative as I did. Let's wait and see if the executive agrees with the work the federal lawmakers have done on the budget, or if the document will be returned to the legislators. We will also be keeping an eye on the fuel situation, as I'm sure the Senate members will be doing also. Well, we will be wrapping up the program at this point. Thanks for being there. Till next week, I'm Lanre Lasese. Take care.